live. This is our first.
Oh, Alex, sorry, but let's just give it 2 seconds to just make sure we're good.
Said we're live.
Yeah. All right. And now you should be good.
Okay, we are going live. This is our first ONSIDE podcast. We are here at the Podstarter studio. We're excited to be here with our guest today. So I'm Alex McCann. I'm your host for the ONSIDE Live podcast at ONSIDE. And we are here today to talk with our wonderful guests. I've got our co-host, Martha Casey, the CEO of Volta. We also have Ross Simmonds from Foundation Marketing, and Saeed El-Darahali from SimplyCast. So thanks so much for joining us. Before we jump into our session and our podcast today, which is being recorded live, I'd have our guests sort of introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves. So Martha, I'm going to start off with you because you're right here next to me and you've got so many interesting things going on. Tell our guests who are listening in or watching us on YouTube who you are.
Thanks, Alex. Great to be here. So I'm Martha Casey, CEO at Volta. And for those of you that don't know much about Volta, we're an innovation hub in downtown Halifax that has more than 40 incredibly inspiring companies, founders that are doing everything. So high potential tech-enabled founders, med tech, ag tech, across the board, cybersecurity. So very exciting space to be. Definitely come check it out. We've got a network space where people can come work through the week, free coffee, great resources. So hope to see you there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. If you're downtown Halifax, definitely got to check out Volta and our awesome mural that is on the side there. Right. Yeah. Check it out. Okay. And Ross, over to you.
Thanks for having me. So yeah, my name is Ross Simmonds. I'm a digital marketing strategist and entrepreneur. I run a company called Foundation. We are a content marketing agency that works with everything from up and coming startups all the way through to some of the publicly traded unicorns in the wonderful world of SaaS. So we've been around since 2014 working with these types of companies and are having a blast at the same time. In addition, I'm a dad. I've got 2 little ones, one on the way, and I love that whole world. I'm trying to earn my dad mug every single day. And yeah, super excited to chat innovation and tech with you folks today. It's going to be fun.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, Saeed, saving the best for last.
Thank you very much, and wonderful to be here with some very popular people in Halifax. My name is Saeed El-Darahali, President and CEO of a company called SimplyCast. We're located in the beautiful Silicon, Dartmouth. The company's been around for over 10 years now, and call to fame is that we support organizations around the world in providing engagement automation in the area of marketing, engagement, emergency, and communication. You may have used some of our technology if you're in Halifax with the contact tracing that was deployed as a social good technology opportunity to help with COVID across all the restaurants in the province. And more recently, we just launched another capability to do vaccine attestation.
Nice.
And we're working on a couple of other things that will be coming out in the next little while. But those are some of the kind of key capabilities that we're trying to help with, especially to end this horrible pandemic. And similar to Ross, I have 5 kids. Or I'm a dad, but similar to Ross being a dad,
that's playing catch up.
And working on my dad mug, which I haven't received one yet, but I'm working on it. So lot to do. 4 boys and 1 girl, and being a family man is very important. And Nova Scotia is the best place to operate a business. So if you're listening from outside of the province, please consider moving to this great province, and we would love to see you here.
Awesome. That's a great plug for our region. I appreciate that.
It's the Miami of Canada.
Exactly. Yes. The Miami of Canada. Yeah.
That's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah, it's the last time.
Yeah.
It's this whipping wind outside.
And unfortunately, due to climate change, you might be right. We might be, head towards those warmer climates. Well, as you guys know, you guys have been our guest on our podcast before, and ONSIDE, we're focused on fostering inclusive, innovation-driven entrepreneurship here in our region. And we're really trying to build a community that's focused on that. And just as we were getting ready to come into the session today, we had some side chats, as we kind of always do before we get started. And we wanted to kind of kick things off with a few topics of interest, which we're hoping that our guests will be interested in. And just as we came in, we saw something that was in Entrevestor, which is a local publication that focuses on entrepreneurship here in our region. And it was talking a little bit about what's going on with regard to financing and funding, which being a startup and early stage companies, everyone's always concerned about what's the financing and funding environment, and we had some discussions around, what's going on there. Martha, you had some thoughts about your reaction to the information. What do you think? And
So, you can't argue with data. And the information showed that last year funding looked really good. This year it still looks very, very strong, but maybe not as strong as last year. We are seeing bigger funding rounds. We're seeing more companies looking at raising in the very near future. It's also very difficult to know. Some companies are quite private about funding, so it's hard to know how much that captures. I think it's representative. I think it shows the trends, but it's important to recognize that the trend is still upward. The trend, year over year, things may flatten out a bit, but we're seeing companies have more access to conversations with VCs. We have companies that are looking, as I said, looking for bigger rounds, so it may not happen as quickly. It takes a little bit longer, but I have not the kind of momentum that is in Atlantic Canada, particularly Nova Scotia, when it comes to access to funding, it's very exciting, and I think it's energizing because the opportunities are there are all kinds of opportunities, and I think it's going to change the landscape, the economic landscape in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah. And how about you, Saeed? Your company's tech enabled, and you have a platform company. We had a chance to talk about that. Are you or Ross seeing things a little differently over this last year and the last period with COVID? Has your company been impacted, or what are you seeing for other companies that are in this space?
Yeah, no. So I mean, for us, we've actually seen an increase in revenue a lot higher than the past 2 years because of all the work that we're doing around the world, closing a lot of different deals. So I think the pandemic has kind of sped up some of the capabilities, especially in engagement automation in the area of emergency communication and engagement. Marketing is also kind of growing across the board now. There's less kind of physical type of marketing, more online marketing. So I think the software world is going to continue to eat the world, I guess, as we continue forward. But to kind of build on what Martha has mentioned about financing, being an ex-venture capitalist myself, I kind of, keep track of what's happening across the region and across Canada. There's still a lot of dry powder that exists. There's a lot more entry, both from the private equity, some hedge funds, angel groups, and so on. So even though the size of the rounds, if you take out the outliers, which is the kind of the biggest rounds that came in, overall Nova Scotia continues to do well. We do have strong, funding rounds that are happening. As Martha also mentioned, a lot of those organizations might not be, reporting some of the rounds, and we'll see a bit of a skew of numbers as we continue to push forward. But if you take a 10-year average, Nova Scotia and the Atlantic region is doing really, really well, and we should not really be focused on the blips of 1 year to 2 year data. We should be really looking at a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year trend, and we're definitely hitting above our weight compared to other regions. But what we really need to continue is push forward with more founders coming in. My biggest worry, just give to the folks that are listening in and watching us on the podcast here, is that there's a trend that later stage companies are going to get the majority of the money, and there's going to be a squeeze for some of the new startups coming in. The only thing that I would give advice to is don't give up, keep pushing forward. There's always somebody that's willing to write you a check. You just need to find them, and I think as money continues to push forward and the economy continues to get better, just reports on jobs, I think we did really well. We've already made over 200,000 jobs compared to pre-pandemic, and this is across Canada. So at least Canada is doing well compared to other jurisdictions, and the money will continue to flow. So even though the numbers look down a little bit, but overall on the 10-year average, we're doing really well.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that we've noticed, and we work with a lot of companies who are venture backed and maybe the full gamut, all the way from late stage publicly traded all the way through to some of those early stage YC companies that are just fresh out. And my advice to the entrepreneurs watching would be like, don't feel like you are restricted to your location to raise funding. I think the pandemic, one of the things that it opened up for a lot of organizations is the opportunity to get capital from outside of the region. And I think that's something to recognize, especially as an early stage company or a one-person founder or a two-person team. When you're getting the funding, don't be afraid to check out sites like AngelList. Don't be afraid to think a little bit differently around how you get your funding. Like there's a lot of unique, interesting things happening today where you are able to, in many ways, crowdsource your funding and have it all as one line item on your cap table. So I would be very much willing to get creative with it and don't feel like the past has to dictate your future, and be okay with going away from some of the traditional norms, because I don't think when you're early stage, you need to rely solely on the large VCs to kind of solidify whether or not you have a good idea. Like I've done angel investing, and I think there's a lot more people who are doing angel investing, writing checks. And for a lot of companies, all you need is that first check. And with that first check, you can get product market fit. Once you have product market fit, you can show traction. And once you show traction, then you start to look at, okay, what is my valuation? How do I go from here? So embrace the idea of also realizing like it's not a local game. You can go above and beyond outside of the region as well as outside of the country, and be okay with that. You no longer always need to jump on a plane. You can send somebody an email, you can send somebody a DM on Twitter, you can send somebody a note on LinkedIn, and you can unlock some of that capital. I would say on a global scale, capital is easier than ever before, and it's very founder friendly. Like the valuations that I'm seeing are ridiculous. They're nowhere near what they used to be. And I think it's a very friendly, founder friendly environment right now because capital is everywhere.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. We've been one of the things we've been doing this week at ONSIDE is we've been running a angel investment training session the whole week with a group called Future Capital, and we worked with Innovacore and Sandpiper Ventures, which is a women-led investment fund that's in our region. And that was actually one of the things that came up. We talked a little bit about impacts from COVID, and because some people back last in 2020. March hit, and if you didn't have a round going, you were like toast. But you raise a really good point, Ross, because what came up in our session and what a lot of people are talking about is that physical barrier, the need to pitch in person.
Right.
People are cutting checks with doing virtual. I mean, there's different considerations and maybe a slightly different due diligence, but that barrier of only being able to access that angel network or that angel group or VCs that are in your backyard, to an extent, some of that is kind of being removed.
I'd say a lot of it is. I think it's a major shift right now.
And there's a huge, echoing what all of you have said, there's a huge increase in the number of people, number of angels in Canada who are very, very keen to invest. The profile that high growth startups have gotten in the last 5 to 10 years has shifted people's idea of what investment looks like.
Yep.
So I think there's a big opportunity there.
100%.
Well, one thing we were talking a little bit about, financing, funding, and people are getting kind of open to the idea of pitching remotely. It's really interesting, kind of the world we're moving into,
Right.
which is that we have a lot of, people who are transitioning, in their lives around, how people are working, how they're showing up, how we're getting involved with operating our businesses, the day-to-day culture of our companies and businesses, and all of those things are starting to change, and the kinds of people that we need to sort of bring in or bring on. And I know ONSIDE, we have a small team, but I'm a Slack-a-maniac, and some of those kinds of things. I'm just kind of curious, like, how have things changed, or what have you sort of observed in the way that the culture, around us is changing or shifting here in Halifax and sort of in our businesses?
Sure, I'll jump in. Overall, 2 years ago when we started, moving remotely, our culture basically pretty much collapsed because it was really relying on people going out for walks together, playing cards, magic and various other, in the office type, events, and it was very difficult. We felt lonely as we're working towards kind of recreating the culture. We haven't been able really to come back to the way that we used to be. You can't really fight the Nerf gun wars behind screens. So the only thing that has probably kind of kept the company together and supported the team is that we've always had a Thursday meeting for an hour where we talk about the business. We talk about everything that happened in the week before, and that kind of gave us a little bit of an anchor, if you wish, because we didn't really change the way we operated. We continue to have the all hands meeting. Doesn't matter how big we got or we're getting. We will continue to have that. The other thing that I continue to do as the commander in chief within the organization is in my before COVID, I used to walk around and just say hello to everyone. Never ask about what they're working on, but more about them, the individual. I've done that now, on average, anywhere between twice to three times a week, where I just message them and do the same thing. And I think that has kept that little bit of, the CEO, the management cares, which is really, really important because, that is the environment that we've lived in. And that's the culture that we have. We've tried to do, events and things like that, but it's not the same. We haven't really figured out a way to make remote work fun the way that we've had. And I'd love to hear what other companies.
Sitting home wearing your PJs. That's not fun. That's not fun.
No. I mean, for some, they're very happy. We've already had employees that have already sold their homes in the city and moved outside of the, they're telling us that they're committed to the company, which is wonderful. But the world has changed, and it's just difficult to have the same amount of fun that we used to have at the office. Just because you can't really replace physical and seeing somebody face to face. So I think we're going to keep working on it. But even 2 years in, I haven't really figured out a way to make work fun remotely yet, the same way that we used to have it at work. And I'm just being honest, because we worked really hard to create the culture over the 10 years, and the last 2 years, just we're still committed. We haven't had any a lot of people leave the organization, which is good because they still remember the good old times, and they're hoping to come back to it.
Yeah, we've been remote pre-pandemic since the beginning. So Foundation was created on this idea of remote work since 2014, the beginning of our company. So the pandemic didn't really influence the culture too much. We were really intentional about creating a remote first environment and culture from the start. So we were able to kind of smoothly transition through the pandemic and not really have a massive impact on culture. But I would say with all of this, we've been growing significantly. So it's a very different game when you're a team of 3 and now a team of 35 to kind of grow through all of this and be a remote team and maintain the culture and the environment and just do that. We've got a team that's spread out all over the globe. We've got folks in Ireland and Nigeria and Vancouver and Toronto, throughout the US. Like, it's a very spread out company. And you have to be very intentional with every interaction. So like, we are very intentional with our communication. We're very intentional with the way in which we communicate as a team. Every Friday we connect, we have social gatherings. So today our team was together and doing some type of game called Ask Away, and we do like a trivia and things like that. So we have a handful of games that are built into Zoom that we've actually started to use. We tried to do some of our board game fans will be able to appreciate this, but One Night Werewolf, which is an amazing in-person board game. We tried to do it on Zoom, not exactly that successful, but you just got to tinker with it. And that would be my reco to everyone is like, experiment, figure out what works for your folks, for your team. And also just like embrace the idea of giving people autonomy more than anything over their calendar and their day to day. But it's definitely been a shift. And I think as we were talking about earlier about like the Great Resignation, it's a fascinating time to run a business. It's one of the most difficult times to run a business, but it's also one of the most exciting. I'm loving it.
Yeah. And we were talking about that a little bit as well, talking about, we're seeing this culture shift of going online and doing things remote. I know I drive my team crazy because every week I'm like, let's try this tool.
Right.
Let's try this. We can communicate this way, like all of those kinds of things. And then, we've been seeing in the news and kind of everywhere this great resignation and people wanting to try different things, learn different things, reinvent themselves. Like, what are you guys like? What do you think is happening out there? What's happening with this great resignation and kind of the
I think it's a
skilling and
sign of the
tooling?
times. Like people
Yeah.
want to switch things up. People are not feeling 100% fulfilled in some of their roles. People are looking for new areas of growth for themselves. And I think all of that is okay. I think everybody's a human. And as a human, the moment you stop looking for growth, it's the moment you stop kind of living. So I'm all for it. Even if it's a foundationite who decides to resign, I'm okay with it, because at the end of the day, if they're finding their next challenge and they're going to be fulfilled in that role, I'm excited for them. I want them to do that. So I think we can, as founders, get easily discouraged by the idea of folks resigning, but we need to look at it as, okay, this is something I can learn from. This is something that I can look at and think, how can I evolve our culture? How can I evolve the way that I serve the team? And how can we create a place that does retain folks if this was someone that you wanted to? So I think it's a challenge, but like I said, I love the game of entrepreneurship. I think it's a new curveball, and it's like a video game. We just got thrown into a new part
simulation.
of it. Yeah. That's a deep talk.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, if I've been kind of following this area for probably the last 15 years, because I read a book probably back in 95, which was called Boom, Bust and Echo by David Foote, which talks a lot about the population and the skewing of baby boomers and so on. But believe it or not, if you actually do a little bit of digging right now, as you're watching this, you'll actually see the Great Resignation actually started 10 years ago. What has happened right now, and you probably have heard this, where we've seen companies from across the U.S. doing what they call acqui-hire, which means they come into a company, look at the opportunity, look at the people. That company might not actually have any revenue, but a lot of the indication was the companies, as far as 10 years ago, were actually coming in, looking at teams and acquiring the team, shutting down their technology, and then keeping those teams together. That is an indication that there was a tight labor market even before the pandemic. What has happened with the pandemic specifically is that the Great Resignation actually started shifting industry to industry compared to technology sector to technology sector, and that created these very large numbers. I also agree with Ross that there's a trend where people are finding it a good opportunity now to make the switch, because the job market is probably the best that it has been, and leaving a job and finding another job was probably a good perception for you to resign and move on to the next. But I believe that that's going to actually not going to be the case in the next 2 years. There's going to be a major squeeze, in my opinion, and the opportunity, at least for now, is that depending on how the economy continues to grow and the logistics that's happening within the global markets, we're going to see a major demand increase over the next year, but then things will come back to normal and things will settle down. So the biggest companies that will probably struggle is the smaller companies, because the wage gap and the wage increases are increasing, and that's going to potentially put more pressure on companies to raise capital, or potentially just walk away and allow those employees to go elsewhere. So I think that this is a bit of a hard times for some of the smaller companies. So if you are raising around, always raise more than you need, at least by 20 to 40%, because wages will continue to increase, and inflation is ramping up as well. For at least it was called transitory, now it's becoming permanent. And hopefully with interest rates going up, that's going to come back down. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, but the Great Resignation already started 10 years ago, but it's now across all sectors rather than selective sectors.
I think it's unique to Atlantic Canada when we had, what we're experiencing right now. I think we were lagging 10 years ago. The market didn't seem quite as tight. People were coming out of school, moving away from the province. Now that doesn't happen quite as much.
Correct.
There's more opportunity here. But I wanted, Ross, something that you said that really stood out to me was supporting your colleagues, your staff, no matter whether they're going to stay or go. And I think that's it's critically important when we think about culture, which we talked about a few minutes ago, because everybody wants to feel like they're continuing to grow in whatever role they're in. And ideally, we can build capacity in teams, but the reality is people this isn't 35 or 40 years ago where people sign up, stick with a job,
Yep.
and then retire out of the same job. So the more skills you can build, I think the more likely it is that you'll retain solid employees longer, but that's never going to be forever. But it makes your organization a more attractive place to work, and
Yep.
you'll attract replacements who have those solid skills. So just jumping around a little bit, something that you'd both spoken about in this context was international. So you mentioned, Ross, that you've got colleagues all over the world.
Yep.
When we think about the labor market and the Great Resignation, it may come back to normal in a year, but that's what I imagine will be likely due to accessing labor markets that we hadn't traditionally thought of.
Right.
So particularly in regions like Atlantic Canada, we have to focus on opportunities to bring immigrants, highly skilled immigrants, and use those skills appropriately. I don't know that we have historically done that. I think we've tried to attract immigrants, and there's been a mismatch of skills. So this is a huge opportunity for us in the region. It will have, I think, our success, and this is a bit of a lobbying, we have to collectively lobby on this. I think our future success really depends on getting this right. And we can distinguish ourselves as a province if we can actually move forward.
I think one of the biggest, I'm not in the politics game at all. I don't get it. I'm not in the space, but I think one of the best things that politicians can do is try to create an environment that is attractive for immigrant founders. When you look at some of the most successful and valuable companies today, the person at the helm is not exactly from the local region in which they're operating the company. Whether you look at Twitters, you look at the Googles, you look at a lot of these organizations.
The SimplyCast.
Exactly. These organizations are oftentimes run by immigrants. So we need to be immigrant founder friendly because it's a massive value add to the local economy and community. And I think it's something that we should be embracing and encouraging. And if you are already here and you're a founder and you are looking for talent, I think it's also an opportunity to look outside of your own borders to say, like, the borders that we used to feel restricted by are truly now an imaginary thing. Yes, there are some things that you need to work through, but for the most part, like, you can employ, you can engage, and you can recruit people from all over the world. So I would strongly encourage folks locally to start realizing, like, this whole concept of being only able to access local talent has somewhat vanished.
It has, and if people aren't willing to take that risk and take on that challenge, they will be left behind.
100%.
So, not to plug Volta, but we are going to be rolling out a program to support founders in accessing talent internationally and taking on some of that administrative burden. So stay tuned for that.
Okay, that's great.
Love it.
That's great. Well, I think Saeed is a perfect example of
100%,
the immigrant founder who's found success in our region. And one of the things that we've been, really focused on is looking at, the role of inclusion related to innovation and entrepreneurship. Like it's something that's so important, whether it's bringing in immigrants who can be founders, or those skilled workers working in some of our startups. We don't have all the skills. We don't have all the people and all the skills, and we need great people to join us. But there have been other folks who have been left out or not been able to adequately participate in kind of our startup environment, our startup culture, our business culture that we have here. And, in the last year or two, focus on equity, diversity, inclusion across many spectrums from health to business have really sort of come to the forefront. And I do think that it's something important, and it's been talked about more and more. So I just wanted to sort of open it up and give us some space to talk about that, because I don't think that we have that many opportunities to really kind of dive into it. So what are you guys thinking about this space? What's top of mind for you when you're thinking about inclusion and innovation and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so I mean, CEOs, regardless of if it's a small company or a large company, really are looking for talent. Period. I think when we had the abundance of talent in the last probably 20 years, EDI may not be top of mind because you had access to your local market. However, when there's a major squeeze that's happening, I think this is a huge opportunity for us to speed up the EDI discussions and showcase that our businesses will probably not survive if we're not able to open up and ensure that we continue to be welcoming and supportive of all walks of life. I think Nova Scotia has been doing a really good job. As a member of the One Nova Scotia Coalition, we did as much as we can in the early days when we put together the Now or Never report, and even Halifax, and this is an actual Nova Scotia, an actual statistic. It showed that we were hospitable and supportive, but not very welcoming of immigrants. That actually changed over just the last 5 years, and the population started to see opportunities that people that do come to Nova Scotia actually create net new jobs rather than take away jobs. And I think that was the biggest issue that we were seeing in the data. That has now, or officially has shifted, and I think overall Canada is now bringing more immigrants to our shores, which is wonderful. The numbers have already increased from 300,000 a year, and it's going up to 400,000. And the corporate world is already asking for those numbers to go up to 500,000 a year. So I think the tide has now shifted, which is great. But on 1-to-1 from a small business to medium businesses, we still continue to see some resistance, and I think there's an opportunity that we need to continue to educate. There's a really great program the Black Business Initiative is actually working on, which is called the Den, and definitely take a look at what they're doing there. It's a great program that allows you to access training along with Dalhousie University to support understanding how to deal with including EDI as part of your corporate culture, how to create inclusion at the board level, create inclusion at the management level, and then eventually across your staff. So I think along with the Nova Scotia government and federal government and organizations like BBI, the Den, and various others, there is now support mechanisms where you could reach out and ask that you don't know what to do and you need the help. Some of these programs are free, some of them you have to pay for, but I think you're not left alone as a management team where you need to take a look at those opportunities. So I think that like I said, things are shifting in the right way, but some businesses, and I'll say this for the record, some businesses will not survive and if they do not change the way that they operate and the way they attract. From an international perspective, as Ross mentioned, our company continues to find really great talent locally. We haven't had to go outside of Nova Scotia to find talent, and I think it really comes down to that we focused on EDI when the company was created. I don't mind tooting our own horn because I want other companies to do the same thing that we did. We hired people with disability. So when you think EDI, you shouldn't be just thinking about people from away. You should be thinking about the unfortunate folks that might not have experience for you to hire. So creating a training program for new graduate training, creating a training program for people with disability. There's an untapped talent that's already in our province that we need to take advantage of and support them to become supportive of our economy. So when you think EDI, think of every walk of life, not just people that are international or people that come from away, as we call them, the CFAs. But there's a current population that is available to work. We just need to reach out to them and train them. And I encourage everyone on this podcast to consider every walk of life to basically support our economy and continue to grow.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. I think for me, I would point to both sides. One, the talent who feels like they've been underestimated, overlooked. And I would encourage you to really recognize that technology in this space is actually one of the greatest opportunities of your lifetime, and it is worth pursuing. There is space for you. There are companies that want you, and there has never been a better time to throw your hat in the ring. And don't disqualify yourself just because you are telling yourself a story. So if you think that you can add value to a company, I would encourage you to take the time and take the effort effort to reach out to founders, reach out to people who are in the situations that you want to be in, and don't be afraid because you're from a different walk of life that there's no space for you. It is there. So I strongly encourage you to take the step. Those who are already in the organizations and those who want to be allies, my advice to you is to send the wire or make the hire. And I stole that from somebody I saw on Twitter say it, but it's very much that simple. You can look at a lot of the funding that has been done in the region, and there isn't much diversity in the founders who are being backed consistently in the Canada at large. Especially here, there's not a lot of funding going directly to founders that aren't necessarily the typical entrepreneur founder. So I would encourage people to actually write the check and realize like you have the power to make a difference that will last for generations. And the only way to make that impact is to actually do things. It's great to talk about it. It's great to get excited. It's great to say, oh, we're going to do these things. But until you make the hire, until you cut the check and send the wire, then you're really just doing lip service. So I would encourage all of those who want to be allies to be an ally by actually doing something versus just talking about the things.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, it's really interesting you say that. And, this, first of all, I just want to give a shout out to Ross because he did the keynote at the BBI Gala the other day. So I just want to give you a shout out for that good work. And, I think that, we at ONSIDE, we did some work. We have a inclusive innovation monitor plug for some of our work, which has over 30 plus indicators around an inclusive economy here in Nova Scotia, looking at everything from the amount of funding that goes into women-led companies, which I think is like 3%, less than 3%. If you're an Indigenous or a Black founder, it's even lower. I think if you're an Indigenous founder, it might be like 0.1%. It's really low. So so those, when folks don't have access to the same level of financing and funding, there's a problem. There's a problem probably on both ends, right? Like it's probably like a structural problem from the top, like, looking down at who they're going to invest in. And then that there could be some issues of, folks coming up, getting ready, being in the position to pitch, be mentored, all of those kinds of things. And, I know at Volta, you guys have been trying to look at this problem, and many others have. What are some things that we're like kind of doing okay at? Like, what are some things that we're doing well in?
I know Martha won't toot her own horn, but I would say Volta's doing a great job at actually going to the root, which is to the youth, and going into the communities and speaking to the youth, which is the next generation, and opening their eyes to the opportunity. So my hat's off to Volta for that work. I think they've been doing some amazing things in the actual communities where these people reside. So keep that up. It lights me up to see it.
Thanks, Ross. So one thing that we've also really focused on is not supposing what underrepresented populations need. We need to be our activities need to be led and guided through collaborations with underrepresented groups. We've had far more success and engagement as a result of that. And overall, I think it's just and apologies for the sigh. I just think organizations like Volta and we're certainly not alone are part of the reason there is this gap. So tech has not historically been a welcoming place for underrepresented communities. And we have to be very, very deliberate and take, as Ross said, what is it? Right?
Send the wire, make the hire.
Send the wire.
Tiffany Bell said that, just in case she's watching.
Send the wire, make the hire. So we have to actually take action. And we've tried to do that, but it can't be in a vacuum. We can't guess. I think there's a real problem of sort of the same people who haven't engaged in the past are trying to guess at what the solution is, and that's just it's going to exacerbate what's already a gap. But we're very excited. We've seen a real shift in the kinds of engagements we're getting at Volta, and that's true of our partner organizations as well.
Yeah. What's something that we could do better? So I think Martha's right. Like we have an idea, especially, what a tech founder, looks like, how they act, how they dress, like the Silicon Valley, kind of motif. But we know that there's immigrant founders, women, all kinds of folks. and we're starting to see some things that are happening. But like, what are some things that we could do a little bit better? Saeed, I know you talk a lot about immigrants, but what else could we be doing here in the province to
So I
kinda
think
kick it up a notch?
the key to success, at least to influence change across a province, you need to start looking at capacity building. You need to start looking at ecosystem focus, and that requires all three levels of government to basically come together, along with private sector, nonprofit organizations, where there's policy to be made, and the opportunities that we need to start integrating some of the things that we want to be, done in 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, into our schools and into our, K to 12, opportunities. Also, the community college is doing a great job in Nova Scotia. I think we're second to none in the work that's happening within our province. The key at the end of the day, and why I think we're lacking opportunities, and I think we're not really focused on this. And I will mention this because I think a lot of people will say, "Oh yes, that is something that we need to figure out." And believe it or not, it's the parents. Parents have been very much focused on, I want my son to be a doctor, I want my daughter to be an engineer, and I want my daughter to become a brain surgeon. And now the shift has now gone in the opposite direction, where kids want to be YouTubers, they want to be gamers. I think being a doctor is probably number 7 on their list based on a stat that I've seen. So I think there's an opportunity that we are focusing on probably the wrong demographic now, because we're trying to get our kids to think about it. But YouTube, along with TikTok, has now influenced their minds that this is where you could become famous, right? So seeing an exit for $1 billion is not going to change somebody's mind anymore, because they think they can make it. So I think there's an opportunity where we need to start focusing on the parents, re-educating them that there's opportunities in these specific skill sets, and by allowing their kids to consider some of those skill sets, I think that would serve the country in the long term. I think the federal government has already done the whole concept with clustering, where we can start focusing on the 5 areas, where Nova Scotia focusing on ocean tech. I think that's a key to long term, but we also need to start thinking about what we can do from the short-term perspective, where somebody that's going to graduate in 3 years from now from grade 10, 11, 12, where we could guide them in areas that are going to focus on the shortages that we think of. One of the biggest problems that we also have is that we look at Statistics Canada and the surveys that are happening, but those surveys are usually 2 to 3 years old by the time they're complete, and the markets are changing every 5 years. And by the time you make a decision and influence the education system, it's already too late. So I think there's an opportunity for private sector organizations like Volta, like Nova Scotia Works, like Teamworks, and other organizations, where we can start looking at retooling those individuals in a year's time, and then bring them into the organization. And that level of commitment has to happen at the government level, because it requires investment in our people to allow them to shift into these new opportunities. And I think that is probably something that we've talked about for probably the last 30 years, but we haven't been able to find a way to make it work really well. So there's an opportunity there. So to kind of wrap up, 2 things: focus on the parents and showcase, and number 2, look at opportunities that are already happening with the Great Resignation, and how we can retool those individuals that might be coming out of the hospitality industry, but might be needed in the construction industry. And some of those people that are leaving the construction industry could potentially work in the tech industry. So I think the retooling is probably something that we need to invest heavily in as a government, because it will probably give us the opportunity of the creation of the capacity building. And then immigration, it will continue, but getting access to 1 million people for a whole country, which means that we're only going to get 7% of those individuals, and from a per capita perspective. And if the shortage is 200,000 people, because Nova Scotia has the highest aging population, representing probably close to 30% of our population. And by 2026, we're probably going to lose another 50,000 potential working and able bodies. And with immigration, even at 10,000, that might not be able to cover the overall numbers.
I love it. I think the point about the schooling system is very important. I think it does come down to a lot of it, like the parents in the way in which we're being exposed to things. Like it's interesting and fascinating to think like a lot of the studies that we read, they're 5 years behind, and things are changing really quickly. Like I think we are living in one of the most interesting times when you look at Web3 and you look at cryptocurrencies, you look at NFTs, and you look at the rise of some of these concepts. They're not things that someone who is not really in the weeds is going to be knowledgeable about. They're not going to know that. There's profs who aren't going to be able to teach about cryptocurrencies. They're not going to know about Ethereum. They're not going to know about Solana. They're not going to know about the Bored Apes. They're not going to know about any of these things. So it's important that we not just focus on actually what we have done in the past, but it's also important that we instill a bit of curiosity into all of the communities, so people are just going out and experimenting. So parents don't restrict your children to say, oh, you have to be an engineer. Open their eyes up to this idea of just being curious, and open their eyes up to tinkering, and open their eyes up to the opportunities that we're not even aware of right now, because there are so many places online today where they can learn things. I think it's great that people are spending time on YouTube learning from people all over the globe and getting access to new information. Because if I was 16, I would be on the internet just consuming all of the information, trying to build relationships with people globally, trying to figure out like, what is the next big thing? What is the next artificial intelligence? And how can I play a role in that? And I would also say, to Saeed's point about the folks who are no longer in a role, such as in construction, let's say you're trying to find something different, acknowledge and realize, folks, like you don't have to be an engineer to be in tech. You can be a salesperson. You can be a marketing. You can be someone who's doing QA. You can be someone who is doing design, graphic design. You can do so many different things. You can be a people leader, right? Like there are so many skills that are still applicable that go outside of the engineering role. So don't feel like just because you've spent the last 5 years in a specific lane, that tech is no longer an opportunity for you. Whether it's SaaS, whether it's ocean tech, whether it's Web3, I believe a lot of skills are being seen as having to go down a certain path when they could actually be very transferable into tech, which is, in my opinion, the greatest wealth generation opportunity of all time. So get it in.
All right, there you go. There you go.
I just want to say that tech, I fully agree, and tech is the future of Nova Scotia's economy. So do not, as Ross said, you don't have to be an engineer. Whatever you're doing, if you're an accountant, if you're whatever it is, there's opportunity in tech. And if you look at the growing companies in our region, you'll see they're scaling tech companies.
Yeah. Well, I want to be. We have some questions that have kind of rolled in. Wanted to get a reflection of the times past and going forward, but I think we'll be mindful of, we're getting a few questions that are coming in. So I think we should see if we can get to a couple of them that are coming in. So we
lightning round.
Yeah, lightning round. We'll do a lightning round. So we have a question that's coming in. I have a camera kind of half in the way. Maybe Martha, you can see the question a little bit. Okay. I see. How do you think? And then there's like a line.
How do you think the COVID physical distances, i.e. not in the same room phenomena, will impact innovation? That hanging out together where new ideas just happen? I think that's a great question. And I wonder what you guys are seeing in your companies, because I think that culturally, and you sort of touch on that, Saeed.
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, if you kind of read the news with JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, CEO has mentioned that innovation is really important that happens at how it happens at the office. I agree that it's going to cause less innovation to happen over time. However, I think the human race has always adapted to changes, or as pandemics or a change in from a climate change perspective than others. So innovation will continue, but I think it will probably slow down a bit because of the physical distancing and not being in the same room. Brain cells are not going to fire as much, but I think over time, as mentioned, Alex mentioned, new tools will come in, new ideas will form, and gaps will form eventually to the point where innovation will come back to its pre-pandemic level. But I think right now we're in this kind of concept, if you wish, or mindset that we think that we're going to come back to the office and we're almost kind of putting ourselves in a pause, and that's kind of normal when when you get sick and you go to the hospital. You're not thinking about if you're going to play soccer tomorrow. You're not thinking if you're going to do the dishes tomorrow. All you're trying to focus on is getting better. And then once you get home, then you're going, oh my God, I haven't done laundry, I haven't done this, I haven't done that. And then innovation goes in a hyper mode where, I'll do the laundry first, then I'll do the dishes after, and then I'll go visit my friends, and then I'll see. So I think we're in this, short period of lack of innovation or disrupted innovation. But I think once people understand that this is going to be the norm or the new normal, I think innovation will pick up. So I agree with whoever asked the question that it will have a negative impact, but I think we will get back to normal again as we start utilizing the various tools and the opportunities of working together in the new normal.
And I have to take a counter to that and think it's going to accelerate. I think that the rise of remote is opening the world up to a moment in which it's kind of like the beginning of the pandemic, when the entire world viewed the pandemic as the enemy and we needed to find a way to solve it. And then we had a moment where it essentially was a crowdsourced problem where minds all over the world were trying to solve a specific problem. And all of these minds, no matter where you were, if you were in Canada, you were in Africa, you were in Europe, Quebec, it didn't matter. You were trying to find a solution, a vaccine, et cetera. And all of these great minds started to work on this project, and journals were being sent from country to country. I think right now, this is happening. I think that companies and innovation is happening in a more crowdsourced way, where you can log into a Discord community and see some of the brightest minds of our generation collaborating and discussing the next wave of Web3. You can go on Twitter and you can see some of the best minds having in-depth debates and discussions about concepts that are going to revolutionize the way that SaaS businesses are grown and are structured. And that is a unseen, unfathomable, if that's the word, concept that has never happened before. Because now we are not limited to the minds that are restricted to walking into the same door. We now are able to get multiple minds from all walks of life, all on a single platform, talking about the same problem and trying to solve it together. So I believe it's actually going to be an acceleration of innovation, because we're going to get more people trying to solve hard problems and more people with a diverse viewpoint that we wouldn't have been able to get all at the same table in the past. Before, you were limited to the people that you hired. Now you can send out an idea, you can send out a problem, and the world will work with you in a community and in a forum to solve it.
Oh, okay. All right. I feel like we might have to come back in the future, another year from now, and like check in on where we are with that one. That's a good one.
I have some ideas to continue on that discussion, but we could be here all
We'll
day.
save that for another. We'll save it for
Indeed.
another one. Okay. I think we have another question that's coming in, which I feel like this is a really big question, but we'll do our best. Martha, Ross, and Saeed. I think it's what are some of the most pressing challenges, needs, spaces in the region that require more entrepreneurs? Okay, yeah. So do we have a
Sure,
a gap?
Yeah, so something that we've looked at, and it's starting to happen. You're also starting to see some funds being formed for it. But about 15 years ago, in Nova Scotia specifically, we saw the transition and the sale of existing businesses, where the family members are no longer interested in taking over a farm, taking over an insurance business, or taking over an existing business. So there's going to be a need for entrepreneurs to land on our shores, to continue some of those businesses and to carry them through the next generation. So and that is a huge number when you look at the small businesses that need to transition ownership. The second is, as Ross mentioned, there's lots of problems that are happening both at the government level, where there's going to be innovation that's required. There's areas in the fisheries industry. There's areas of manufacturing. So there's a lot of opportunities that I've seen across multi sectors that requires more entrepreneurs to come in, and that's why I think entrepreneurship is probably one of the best places to create wealth, if that's the area that you're looking to enter into. But you need to find that major challenge. And just on the last point that we were talking about, we're seeing a lot of innovation that's going to accelerate on the tech side.
Yep.
But we can't forget that there's so many different sectors,
100%.
right? And that's where I think there's the opportunity that tech will continue to innovate very quickly, but there's a lot of lagging areas of the industry that we're not really watching because we're kind of very focused on one area as tech entrepreneurs. But there's opportunities and challenges that we need more individuals to come in and help us with our health care crisis that we're going to be in. We need more doctors, for example, because that's something that with the aging population, along with the aging profession of doctors, that we're going to see a major problems. Long-term care and home care. That's another major issue that's coming up that we need more people in. So if you focus on tech, things are going to look great for the next 20 years, but all these other traditional industries are lacking and require entrepreneurs to come in and support. Even school buses, drivers, we're lacking drivers. Somebody calls in sick, we don't have a second driver to come in to support our kids going to school. So there's so many disruptions that are happening all at the same time that we truly need to look at an ecosystem approach of getting entrepreneurs to come in and support these industries to continue, because our quality of life in Canada, the only reason that we have it is because we have a capitalism that's driving innovation and businesses that are starting up and people that are looking to create wealth.
Yeah. And I think the entrepreneurs, if you take a tech lens to a lot of these problems, there's a massive opportunity there. Right. If you look at buses, if you look at housing, I think housing regionally is something that is talked about often. I have mad respect for all of those in the public sector, but I think private has a greater opportunity to be involved there and to make a massive impact on the community in the positive ways that they're aspiring for. And I would encourage entrepreneurs to be at the front of that, trying to come up with innovative solutions for better priced housing. I think that's the opportunity that exists. I think when we think about infrastructure across the province, if we want to really lean heavily into this remote world and make it easy for someone in Annapolis Valley or Cape Breton to be able to take part in the tech economy and what is thriving in the next biggest wave of growth and wealth, let's give them good internet. Let's give them the ability to log in and to be a part of Web3 and all of these fascinating things that we talk about, while also recognizing that, yes, as I mentioned, like there's traditional industries that also need these people, and these people who might just not be able to be involved in tech today because of poor internet, poor access, etc. If they can take care of some of those fundamental things and they apply innovative thinking to that, it would be cool to fast forward 5 years and see my kids going on a bus with no driver because the driver is an AI. I'm okay with that, I think, but I'll dive into it.
Or maybe we're all living the metaverse.
Right, exactly. Right. The teaching could happen at home. That's another opportunity. Right. We could geek out on this for hours, but like homeschooling is a thing. It's going to happen. It's starting to evolve. And I know some people are going to be like, well, Ross, you're getting wild here. I know, but like there's so many opportunities. And if you can think about it around how you can apply tech to old industries, old spaces, and there's a ton of opportunity there. When you think about B&Bs that have founders and entrepreneurs who have led them for decades, but they have to step away because they've gotten older. If you apply tech thinking to a lot of these organizations and a lot of these companies, the profit margins are going to go higher, the efficiencies are going to go higher, the people who are employed there are going to have a higher morale, they're going to be happier because you are embracing some of the philosophies that ultimately allow for a better life. I'll stop.
So one thing, fully agree with you both, tech opportunity in tech across all industries, but one thing we haven't talked about, and I think it's a huge opportunity for the future, and there's going to be massive growth, is the green economy and clean energy. And that's something both provincially and federally is an enormous focus. We've got the community colleges and post-secondaries training students in this area. So I think if you were to focus on one area, you shouldn't, because there's opportunity everywhere. But it's, I think that's where we may see some of the biggest growth.
Yes, and nuclear is coming back.
Oh God. Okay. Well, we'll save that for another. We'll save that for another chat. We'll save that for another chat. Okay. So I think we've used up all of our time today. I really appreciate everyone joining us for our very first podcast live event with the ONSIDE podcast. It was the first time to try it. So awesome. Hopefully it went okay. And I just want to thank all of our guests who are here today. For the people who are listening in online or watching us on YouTube, how can people connect with you? I always want to make sure that people know how they
Twitter,
can connect.
LinkedIn, and Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm on all of the platforms. On Twitter, I'm at the coolest cool. Most channels, I'm on that. That was my university decision. But you can give me a quick search online. You can find me.
Martha?
So I'm on the same platform. Well, really just Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. I'm not as robust as Ross in that area. And reach out to Volta anytime. We'd love to have any of you down there for a tour and to spend some time with my colleagues.
Okay. Yes. And of course, you can, like and subscribe our podcast and check us out on our website. We're happy to have you connect with us there. And just want to thank everybody for a great time this afternoon, and happy holidays. And we'll be seeing you guys on our next podcast. Thanks so much for
having me.
joining.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Happy
Alex.
holidays. Take care.
Cool.
Okay.
Awesome.